Word Wednesday. We are going to have an awesome night tonight. Would you take a moment right now and get out your phone, get on your computer, and share this right now? We want our whole church, and we've got so many friends online, Facebook, social media, Instagram. We got so many friends out there. We want them to know about Word Wednesday, so share it right now. We are so privileged tonight to have Dylan and to have Luan and Raquel leading worship for us. So wherever you're at, whether you're in your living room, at home, why don't you stand with us? We're going to sing a couple songs. We're going to worship together.
I give you glory for all it brought you through, and now I'm ready for everyone to do. I'm moving forward to follow after you, and now I'm ready for everyone to do. Your presence is an open door. We want to more like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. Every season, your grace has been true, and I believe in the best is yet to come. The cross before me, my hope of things unknown, and in you, Jesus, the best is yet to come. Your presence is an open door. Come to Lord like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. I know, made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God made me a promise and it won't stop now. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. Amen.
Thanks, guys. That was awesome, wasn't it? We're so excited to be together tonight, hearing the word and opening our hearts up in worship. We got some great things coming up, church, that we're really excited about. That even if you just want to take a moment, mark them down, maybe invite somebody out. First of all, our fall kickoff is happening this Sunday in all of our locations, and we're really excited about this, especially baptisms. We're doing baptisms in most of our locations. It's going to be so good, and we want you to be a part of that. And so if you're interested in being baptized, maybe you've never been baptized before, or you know someone that you need to get to church and get baptized, you can email us info@myhomechurch.ca, and we're sure to get you in that list, and it's going to be so good. As well, this Sunday, we've got Pastor Jakin releasing his new song, Down to the River. It's going to be so good. I've heard the video. We're going to be watching the video in church. The video is amazing. Really looking forward to seeing that, and that's going to be so life-giving to you. So this Sunday, fall kickoff. Well, this evening, I have the privilege of talking to you. And, we just came out of an interesting summer. It was a summer like no other summer we've ever had before. But there were still some things that were the same. A lot of people got out camping. Maybe you got out on a road trip, or maybe you got out on the lake on the boat. I know this summer I had the opportunity to get out on the lake. And my father-in-law has this really fast, souped-up boat. He has this Kingfisher Falcon jet boat. And back in July, we went up just north of Whitecourt. And it was amazing when he opened that thing up, how the bow came up out of the water and the jet of water went out the back, and you're sucked back in your seat. It was quite the experience. And then just a couple of weeks ago, we went camping with some people from our church. And on the one day, somebody brought out a boat, and it was one of these big pontoon boats. And we were just out at Pigeon Lake, right? And Pigeon Lake in August really is more like a slough. And so we were just kind of chugging along, like 15, 20 miles per hour, pretty slow. And a completely different experience, right? On one hand, you're going on the jet boat, you're going, like I said, probably 40, 50 kilometers an hour at least. And then the next time we were on this slow bob along the lake pontoon boat experience. Two very different experiences on two very different boats. Well, tonight I want to talk to you about a couple boats in the Bible. And we're going to start in Acts chapter 27. And this is the story of Paul. He's been jailed wrongly, and he has now appealed to Caesar. And he said, listen, I want to go to Italy, and I want to appeal my case to Caesar himself because I'm a Roman citizen. And so they take Paul, who's a prisoner, and they put him on a boat. And they make their way across the Mediterranean, and they encounter a storm. And in verse 9 of chapter 27 of Acts, it says, much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous because by now it was after the Day of Atonement. So Paul warned them, men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo and to our own lives also. But the centurion, instead of listening to Paul, followed the advice of the pilot and of the owner of the ship. Now, of course he did, because Paul's not a pilot and he doesn't know anything about sailing. But he had some advice for them, and they didn't listen. And so since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. This was a harbor in Crete, facing both southwest and northwest. And when a gentle south wind began to blow, they saw their opportunity. So they weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. Before very long, a wind of hurricane force, called the Northeaster, swept down from the island. And the ship was caught by the storm and could not head into the wind. So we gave way to it and were driven along. It's kind of funny. It sounds a lot like how a lot of our lives have been in the storm of COVID, our lives being driven along by the circumstances. And it says in verse 16, as we passed to the lee of a small island near Cauda, we were hardly able to make the lifeboat secure. So the men hoisted it aboard. They passed the ropes under the ship itself to hold it together because they were afraid they would run aground on the sandbars of Syrtis. So they lowered the sea anchor and let the ship be driven along. We took such a violent beating from the storm that the next day they began to throw the cargo overboard. Pay attention to these details because they're going to come into play later. Verse 19 says, now on the third day they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. When neither sun nor stars appeared for many days and the storm continued raging, we finally gave up all hope of being saved. We gave up all hope of being saved. Did you catch that? Did you know the book of Acts was actually authored by the good Dr. Luke? Now, Luke witnessed a lot in his life, including some significant time with Jesus. Now, he didn't say the heathen unbelievers lost all hope. He says, we gave up all hope. So you know it's pretty bad. Verse 21 says, and after they had gone a long time without food, Paul stood up before them and said, men, you should have taken my advice not to sail from Crete. Then you would have spared yourself this damage and loss. Basically, Paul's saying, I told you so. But now I urge you to keep up your courage, because not one of you will be lost. Only the ship will be destroyed. Only the ship. You know, that's probably a sermon in its own right there. You might lose some time, you might lose some money, you might lose some relationships, some opportunities or friends, but you're going to make it. Only the ship is going to be destroyed. And even if the ship is all beat to heck, God can still use your life. Verse 23 says, "Last night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me, and he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand trial before Caesar, and God has graciously given you the lives of all who sail with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith in God that it will happen just as he told me. Nevertheless, we must run aground on some island.' Now on the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about midnight the sailors sensed that we were approaching land. They took soundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found that it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we'd be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Then Paul said to the centurion and soldiers, 'Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved.' So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it drift away. Now just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. 'For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food. You haven't eaten anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head.' After he had said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of all of them. Then he broke it and began to eat. They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board." Luke counted every single one. Every one. You know, and that's the vision of our church. Everyone needs Jesus. Everyone needs a home. Luke didn't round down. He didn't say, well, altogether there was about 250 of us. No, Luke knew there was 276 people because everyone on that boat mattered. And it says that when they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lightened the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. And when daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with a sandy beach where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they let them into the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders. Then they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow struck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping. But the centurion, wanting to spare Paul's life, and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and to get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or other pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land safely. Great ending to a story. The ship falls apart, all this trouble, but everyone made it to land safely. I want to very quickly read you another boat story in the Bible, but this one's a little bit different. I want you to catch the parallels. We're now in Jonah chapter 1. And it says, "And the word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come before me." But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound for that port. And after paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God, and they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he'll take notice of us so that we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let us cast lots to find out who's responsible for this calamity." And they cast lots, and the lot fell to Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" And he answered them, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." I'm just going to take a second here. Don't you hate it when other Christians make us look bad by the way they live? You know, sometimes I cringe at the stuff that I read and I see on social media. And I'll tell you straight up, I'm not immune. I can remember when I was 19 years old, I was a youth pastor in Ponoka, and I bought my first car for $600. And one of the first things I did is I drove down to Scott's Parable bookstore because I was going to get my very own Jesus fish. And I can remember the pastor at the time, Bridget, she said, "You can't do that." And I thought, well, why can't I do that? She said, "You can't do that. You're a terrible driver." You know, sometimes we get ourselves into these funny things by our bad attitudes. We're going to continue on. Verse 10 says, "Now this terrified them, and they asked, 'What have you done?' They knew he was running away from the Lord because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher, so they asked him, 'What should we do to you to make the sea calm down for us?' 'Pick me up and throw me into the sea,' he replied, 'and it will become calm. I know that this is my fault and that this great storm has come upon you.'" Basically, it's my fault, my bad. Your guys' lives are in trouble and the ship's falling apart. My bad. Sorry, guys. My bad. He's so depressed, though, by the circumstances that he is literally willing to commit suicide by having these men throw him into the sea. Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man. For you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Here, the unbelievers on the boat are more concerned about the will of God than Jonah the preacher was. And then they took Jonah and they threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Now the Lord provided a great fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. Now, if you know the rest of the story, basically, the fish spits him out. He goes into Nineveh with a bad attitude. He preaches a crummy sermon. God blesses it anyway. The people repent. They turn to God, and Jonah gets moody and ticked off about it all. 2 different preachers, 2 different boats, 2 similar yet kind of different situations. One preacher who is sailing 2,000 kilometers to fulfill the will of God for his life, while another preacher is sailing hundreds of miles to get away from the will of God. One man who is willing to do whatever it takes, living on mission, even if it means being in chains and being treated like a dog, while the other man will do almost anything but what God wants him to do. Here it is. Every one of us, we're all on a boat. That boat might be your school, it might be your workplace, it might be the community you live in, the neighborhood you live in, it might be the sports club that you're a part of, the team that you're on, it might be the organization that you help lead in the community, the church that we're a part of. We all have a boat. So here's my question, and really my only point tonight for you, and it's this. Is the boat that you are on better because you are on it? One man saved the life of every man on board, 276 to be exact, just because he was on board. So is the boat better off because you're on board? Because if you're a believer in Jesus, quite frankly, every boat is supposed to be better because you're on it. Let's be real. I can think about all the times in my life that the boat I was on was not better because of my own attitude. And I'm not talking about before maybe I accepted Christ, or I'm talking like last week, you know? I know what it's like to be in this place where our attitude draws us down. But Jesus calls us to be the salt and light to the earth, right? We're the ones that are designed to bring flavor and preserve our world. We're the ones that are supposed to be illuminating the dark places. You know, maybe it's the boat of being a mom, the boat of being a dad. Maybe you're on the boat of being a student. You're on the boat of being a husband or a wife, or the boat of being a friend, or an employer or an employee. So my question is that boat better because you're on it? Or is it on the verge of sinking because of your rotten attitude? Paul knew that the boat was safe because he was on it. Paul knew he might have been rubbing some people the wrong way. I don't think that we should be traveling right now, right? There were some things that he said that probably irritated them. Not everyone liked him, but he knew that the boat was better off because he was living on purpose. He was living missional. That's the language that Pastor Jacob was using on Sunday. Let's get back to mission. He made the boat better. He was light in a dark, stormy situation. Ask yourself, are you Paul or are you Jonah? Are you a Jonah who goes below deck to fall asleep while people are perishing when the boat is sinking? Or am I Paul, who might not do it perfectly, but I'm living on mission? God's people are supposed to be making the boat better. You know, I'll be honest, I don't always make the boat better. Sometimes the only time I reach out is to complain. And I have to wake myself out of that. I gotta stir myself. And you know, and that's really some of the language that we've been using and recognizing in the midst of COVID-19 and pandemic and all the trouble. There's been a slumber that's come over the church that we really need to shake ourselves out of. Wakey, wakey, right? Where was Jonah? He was below deck. He was having a COVID nap. Church, it's time for us to get back to church, getting back to mission, getting back to life. I don't know about you, but I know that my life is better because of people that were on my boat. I know that if it wasn't for some of the pastors or friends or people that fed into my life, there's people that have made the boat that I'm on better. I think in turn, we ought to make the boat better for others around us too. You know, before we're going to change gears in just a moment, and I'm going to have Luan and Raquel come back and lead us another song. But just before that, you know, Jesus was once on a boat, and he made it better, figuratively and literally. You know, in Mark chapter 4, it tells us that as Jesus was crossing the lake with his disciples, the storm came in, and it blew in, and the trouble came in, and the turmoil, much like things that we're experiencing now in a figurative sense. The COVID storm, economic uncertainty, all the trouble, political turmoil, racial tension, all these things happening. And while that storm was going on, Jesus was in the boat. And he was taking a nap, he was taking a rest. And while this was going on, the disciples came out and they got a little accusatory and they said, "Don't you care that we're perishing? Don't you care that we're in trouble? Don't you care that this boat's about to sink?" And of course Jesus cared. He cared a lot. But he knew that they'd be fine. Why? Because he was on the boat. And so he stood up and he spoke. He said, "Peace, be still." And he spoke peace into that calm. You know, church, that's our role in this world. That's our role in this circumstance today. We're to speak peace. We're the salt. We're the light. We're the ones that preserve and bring flavor. We're the ones that illuminate in the midst of darkness. You know, during this COVID season, you might have felt a lot like a prisoner who couldn't do a whole lot. Paul was in chains. The ship might, though, suffer loss, and it might get all beat to heck. But if you and I, if we hold on to God's will for our lives, if we hold on to God's purpose and we walk in faith, if we'll make a decision that we're going to get back to mission, that we're going to get back to life, if we're going to put those first things first, the things that we know in our hearts that we ought to be doing, we're going to make it through this storm. We're going to make it through the other side, because God's good. Can I just take a moment and pray for you? Even right now, wherever you're at, why don't you just open up your heart? Maybe you want to just get into a posture. You know, maybe you want to lift your face, maybe you want to close your eyes, bow your head. Maybe you want to lift your hands up high or just right at your side. Maybe you want to kneel, whatever. Just get into a posture right now where you can just receive from God, and maybe you can just correct and adjust the attitude and the heart a bit. Father, for our church tonight, Lord, I ask and pray that you would do a deep inner work in us. Help us, God, Father, not to adopt the negative attitudes that we see, Father, maybe demonstrated a bit in the life of a man like Jonah, but Lord, help us to adopt, God, the purposeful attitude of Paul, who stuck it out, who made everything better, lives saved because of his missional attitude. Help us, Lord, in Jesus' name. Why don't you stand with us and sing?
Yes, Lord, I am
Hasn't this been a great evening? Thanks for joining us tonight. We're so glad that you tuned in with us. Listen, church, let's get back to life, back to mission. Let's tell God, I'm available. Here I am, God. I'm available. It's time to get back to mission. Right now, you can tune into your Zoom groups that are happening all over the online world. That's going to be so good for you. And of course, register for church this Sunday. It's going to be so good. If you're in Calgary, register for Saturday. But in all of our other locations, Sundre, Stettler, Red Deer, Panoka, and of course, Olds Mountain View, register. Go to events.myhomechurch.ca and let us know if you're coming on Sunday. God bless you. Have an amazing evening. Thanks for being with us.